2022 was the first year that I watched over 100 new releases, so in this video I'm giving you guys my top 10 favorite movies of this year. Before we get into my list, as always, let me know your 10 favorite movies of 2022 in the comments down below. And before we get into my top 10 list, I wanted to give you guys 10 honorable mentions. So in 20th place is The Woman King, and 19th place is Violent Night, and 18th place is On the Count of Three, 17th place Bullet Train, 16th place The Menu, 15th place Glass Onion, 14th place Wakanda Forever, 13th place Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, 12th place Triangle of Sadness, and in 11th place Avatar: The Way of Water. But starting off the list of my top 10 favorite movies of 2022 is one that I think a lot of people aren't going to agree with me at all whatsoever, but that is in 10th place Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I don't care what anyone says, I am a Marvel nerd, and this movie was my absolute dream. I mean, you have Sam Raimi directing this movie. Doctor Strange is my favorite character in the MCU that's alive. Wanda is also one of my favorite characters. She's absolutely amazing as the villain. And the biggest issue definitely comes in with the Illuminati, which for some reason is a lot of other people's favorite part about this movie. But I really enjoy some of the more thematic moments of this movie where you have these moral dilemmas between Wanda and Doctor Strange, and then also these themes that Doctor Strange has been carrying on since his first movie. And I feel like he was definitely more of a pawn in Infinity War and Endgame and stuff like that. It didn't really feel like he was Doctor Strange battling his own inner demons, as some people would say. But I think this movie really expresses that very well. Even in the beginning of the movie, you have that guy say that, oh, you're the world's best surgeon, your life must be perfect. But he had to watch like 13 million ways that the world can end in Infinity War. There's so much internal conflict going on with this character, and I definitely think this movie expressed that well enough. Now, one thing I don't think this movie really did that well is exploring the multiverse. For being called Multiverse of Madness, you don't get much multiversal exploration. I don't really think that the switching the way that the stoplights work and then pizza balls are really madness enough in the multiverse. And so I definitely think they could have elevated that. But for what this movie is, it's a 2-hour non-stop journey that has some really important and in my opinion, very effective thematic elements. I think this movie is a really great comic book movie. Moving on though, in 9th place for me is The Fabelmans. This is Steven Spielberg's newest film. It's loosely based on his life, and I didn't get to do a full review on this movie because I did a back-to-back double feature, watching 2 movies a day, 2 days in a row in theaters, and so it was just too much for me to actually review this movie. But this one really did hit me on more of just a personal level of, you know, following your dreams, following your passions, no matter what's happening around you. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the movies on this list really hit me in the heart. I would say pretty much every single movie upwards on this list, other than one of them, was really just emotionally resonant with me. And that's why it's up high on my 2022 list. And that's what I love. I'm going to talk about this at the end of the video a lot more, but that's why I love this year in film so much. And that's why I think it's probably one of my favorite years of film ever, because it emotionally resonated with me so much. And The Fabelmans is the perfect example of that. I think up higher on the list, some of them resonate with me just a little bit more. But for what The Fabelmans is, I mean, it's a beautifully crafted movie. The script is powerful. It's deep. I think every single performance in this movie is absolutely amazing. Paul Dano, Michelle Williams, and the lead actor, I forget his last name, but I think his first name is Gabrielle and it's something else. And he is absolutely amazing. I doubt he's going to get Oscar recognition for this role, but he 100% deserves it. There's this one scene towards the end of the movie in a high school like locker room type of thing where one of the side characters has this absurd like breakout moment, and it's just so insanely good. It's so insanely powerful. And I think, yes, the performances are amazing, but I think it all comes down to the script, and I think it all comes down to just what the source material is, which is Steven Spielberg's life, and how powerful it really is. I mean, this man is like 78, 79. He's in his late 70s, and he's still making cinema like this. Next up on the list, in 8th place, is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I don't really know much else to say about this movie because I feel like I've talked about it a lot, but at the end of the day, this movie is just so dark and depressing, and the fact that it's a kids movie is insane, but like it's so emotionally deep, and it's just a stop motion movie. Like, you wouldn't expect to leave this theater so emotionally drained, but this movie is amazing. I mean, firstly, the stop motion, it's absolutely beautiful. It's perfect. I mean, it's so intricate and detailed. It just works so well. But then even further than that, you have these insanely detailed themes of death and grief and emotion. And Papa's character does an amazing job of really like letting go of these themes and putting it onto the audience. And even Pinocchio's character, I mean, you have these like amazingly deep and dark moments that you wouldn't expect it from Pinocchio. And maybe that's why I love this movie so much, is because I just wasn't expecting it. And I was going in, it's a kid's movie. I'm not going to think too much of it. And I left this theater. I did leave crying. I did end up tearing up at the end of this movie, because it's just so like, it's so dark and it's so deep and it's so amazing. I mean, for me personally, I've never had like a near death experience. I've never had to deal with death in a major way ever. And so this movie really put into perspective like the amount of lives you get and what you can do with this life and stuff like that. And another movie on this list does kind of go hand in hand with those themes, and I absolutely love that movie as well. Obviously, that's why it's on the top 10 list. And so I think those themes really resonate with me because I've never experienced something like that. And so these movies are really like a wake-up call. And I think the fact that it was done through this medium, that's what really surprised me in a really good way. Next, though, in 7th place for me is Park Chan-wook's newest movie, Decision to Leave. And this movie is beautiful from the first second to the final second. It's quite possibly the best looking movie of the year. I mean, it's just an absolute cinematography clinic from the first second to the final second. But on top of that, another reason why it's on this top 10 list is because of how emotionally resonant it is for me. And it's not necessarily that like I relate to these themes, but it's something that like I kind of fear. And so this movie really follows those themes without getting into any spoilers. It really follows those themes of like chasing something but never actually getting it, and then at that end point it's just gone forever and there's like quite literally nothing you can do about it. And so this movie does a great job of giving us that message without it actually feeling very corny and cheesy. I mean, at times there is some weird dialogue in terms of just moving the story forward. I think the pacing is a little bit off in the second act as the mystery is unfolding. But for a crime thriller that actually has these deeper, darker themes, at least in my opinion, it does a really great job of getting you invested into these characters, and then by the end, making everything feel like it's really worth it. Like, you have this amazing payoff from these characters that you're so invested in from the get-go. It doesn't ever feel like they're trying to put other characters down for the sake of the story, even though both of our main characters are bad to a certain extent. And again, I just really like the way that this movie is crafted, and it really, really implements these emotional themes into it very well, especially like when it's generally just being like a psychological crime thriller movie, but it really dives deep into those movies, which is really unexpected, but I think it works really well. And it's definitely like from Park Chan-wook, it's definitely like the least like sexualized movie, but it's more like internally like, it's more internally about love rather than it is about like physically showing it, like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. I mean, Park Chan-wook is iconic for that stuff. Like, we all know that he's infamous for making those kinds of movies. But this movie, he shies away from that, but thematically he keeps it the same, which I can really, really respect. But next up on the list in 6th place is one of the most surprising movies of the year, to at least to me, and that is Top Gun: Maverick. Now, this movie was honestly in my top 3 for a very long time, but it just shifted out strictly because the more I think about this movie and like I try to sit down to rewatch it, I've seen this movie like 3 times. I saw it twice in theaters and once at home on my TV. It's an amazing movie. It's a visual spectacle. I mean, from the stunts to the heartfelt and emotional story, by the end, you really feel like you're part of this team. And I think it's an amazing movie. But the reason why it falls short of my top 3 is just because I feel like at times the story does feel a little bit lackluster. I mean, it is a very basic story, and I feel like my top 3, it does do a little bit more with the story, or at least more in terms of what I enjoy. And my 4th and 5th place are very close. I do go back and forth, but it's just that I would be able to rewatch Maverick more than Banshees of the Inisherin, so I put it just above there. But again, at the end of the day, I hope that putting it in 4th place doesn't undermine how much I absolutely adore this movie. I mean, it's a stunt galore. All these pilots learned how to fly, these fighter pilots. I mean, it's shot so well. It's edited to perfection. I would probably say behind one of the other movies that's on this list, it's the second best like edited movie of the year. The sound design is insane. It's just, I don't know how they put this movie together, like everyone flying and clipping all of these things together. And also on top of that, the final act of this movie is amazing. Honestly, I thought that like when everyone, again, no spoilers here, when everyone thought the movie ended and then it just kept going, I was like, oh my God, we're still going. Like there's still so much more story to tell. And so I was very excited while watching this movie. But again, the story is just a little bit more lackluster than my top 3. Getting into the top 5, as always, let me know your top 5 favorite movies of the year in the comments down below. But my 5th place is The Banshees of the Inisherin. This movie is so amazing. I mean, I didn't tear up or cry at all during this movie, but it's probably the most emotionally resonant I've been with the film this entire year. It's about 2 friends. One of them just says, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. I want to go live my life. And then our main character of Colin Farrell, who plays the character, just doesn't want to do that. He wants to know why. He wants some kind of closure. And it's not that I resonate with one character the most, but I definitely resonate with Colin Farrell's character a little bit more. Like, I'm very scared to let go of a lot of things, and this movie handles that so well. And I've never been able to articulate why or the reasonings and stuff like that, but this movie just puts it all into perspective so quickly and so well. Like, firstly, just starting off on a technical side, this movie is shot masterfully. The cinematography is absolutely amazing. It's focused on so many wide shots that you feel the scale of just this little island. You feel the scale of Inisherin, but you also feel the scale of this friendship that used to once be close, but now is starting to drift away. And it wasn't like even like after I got out of the movie that I was like enlightened or something like that. Like kind of what like Pinocchio and the Fabelmans, like I didn't have that effect on me right walking out of the theater. But the more I thought about this movie, it's like this movie is really doing something with this topic of friendship, and it's executing it in such a phenomenal way to where it doesn't feel corny, it doesn't feel cheesy. And on top of that, you have these absolutely amazing performances. We have to mention, obviously, Colin Farrell. He is absolutely amazing. He's also had an amazing year with After Yang and The Batman. This is obviously my favorite performance from him of the entire year, even though I absolutely love him as Penguin and I love him in After Yang. I definitely think this is his best performance by far. But we also have Brendan Gleeson, who plays Colm. He is amazing. He has such a subtle and nuanced performance that's also super powerful when it needs to be. You have Carrie Condon, I think that's how you pronounce your last name, but she plays Colin Farrell's sister, who's also amazing. And then the standout performance of this entire film, Barry Keoghan. Now, there's been this clip going viral of him on Twitter lately about this one scene where he confesses his love to another character. I don't want to give any spoilers away because I definitely think you should experience this movie for yourself. But that scene, it just shows like the way that Barry Keoghan transforms into these different characters, whether it be the Joker or whatever his character's name was in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, his characters are always so different. And the way that they act, the way that they move, the way that they talk, their little speech like details, they're always different. Barry Keoghan brings something so amazing to these characters, something so new and so fresh, that it's no different in this movie. I mean, he puts an absolute clinic on. I mean, so does Colin Farrell, so do all the other performers, the actors and actresses. They're all great. But Barry Keoghan, that one really stuck with me. Next on the list, in 4th place for me, is Damien Chazelle's Babylon. Now, this movie was really surprising to me because, yes, I was super excited for it. I absolutely love Damien Chazelle. La La Land and Whiplash are some of my favorite movies of all time. Though I haven't seen the first one, I've only heard great things about it. Babylon had a lot of mixed reviews when it came to early reactions, everyone else's review. But if you guys checked out my Babylon review, you guys will know I absolutely love this film. I said this in my review on Letterboxd, but it pretty much covers the 3 aspects of life that I fear most. And like I've been saying throughout this entire video, this year's been such a personal and emotional year for film for me. And this movie being the final 2022 release that I watch, it encapsulates this year perfectly. It tackles the 3 themes of loss, longing, and legacy. And those are three themes and things that I just fear in general, which is loss, like losing someone, losing something, losing out on the chance to do something. And that's exactly what Manny Torres goes through in this movie. Longing, which is kind of going into loss of things you've had in the past. And when you're actually like in the moment and what you're taking advantage of and stuff like that. Manny Torres goes through that. I forgot Margot Robbie's character's name, but she goes through that as well. Even Brad Pitt's character goes through that. And finally, legacy. And this is probably the biggest one because I feel like we all, or at least the ones that want to do something big in this world, have to deal with the thought of legacy. And that's exactly what this movie is about. From the very first trailer, that's the discussion that Margot Robbie and Diego Calva's character discussed.
If you could go anywhere in the whole world, where would you go?
I always want to be part of something bigger, something that lasts, that means something more important than life.
They talk about the legacy that they want to leave in Hollywood, and in the very end of this movie, no spoilers like story-wise, but the end of this movie is just beautiful in terms of wrapping it all up. If you guys want to see my ratings for all my other movies on this list, go ahead and check out my Letterboxd or my singular reviews for them. But I will say, Babylon, I did give this a 9 out of 10. I really genuinely wasn't expecting to do so. I mean, not only the three themes thing that I talked about, but also just Damien Chazelle puts on a clinic in all areas here. It's amazingly written. There's so much going on. There's like, from the first second to the final second, it's hectic as hell. And I also talked about this in my spoiler-free review for the movie, which is, I wasn't the biggest fan of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but what this movie does, what Damien Chazelle brings so good to this movie is emotion. He brings in this aspect that's missing in so many of these grand and super massive Hollywood stories. He brings in this super emotional rock with Manny Torres's character, and that character really just drives the nail through this movie and gives a central story, character, relationship to actually care about. And yes, this movie is 3 hours long. Sometimes it feels like it, but most times it doesn't. And when I say it feels like it doesn't even feel like it in a bad way. It feels as in a way of like that theme that I talked about before of legacy. You see the beginning of time with movies to the very end, this modern time that we're in. And the final 5 minutes of this movie is absolutely beautiful. As someone who is becoming and trying to become a better film critic, trying to understand the evolution of film, the evolution of cinema, and all that great stuff, this movie is a perfect way to encapsulate it. And this isn't my thought, but I saw this on Twitter where someone said, this feels like the final movie of all movies. This feels like it could just be the final movie ever made, and it would encapsulate all of cinema. And this movie does that. It does it perfectly. And that's why I love this film. But next up, in third place for me, is RRR. Now, we did recently get news that they are going to make a sequel to this movie, and I am so excited for it. And I'm going to be honest, I've only seen this movie one time, and it still did make my top 3. It's 3 hours long. I wasn't planning to rewatch this at any point either, but this movie is so amazing. I love Bollywood movies, and this is my first ever Tollywood movie, and so I was very excited to get into it because I had never really gotten to experience like a different like movie style from India, and you can definitely tell the similarities here. But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter because they make it so unique with the actual storytelling. My biggest issue with Bollywood movies is, yes, sometimes the scope, scale, and size is there, but they never actually get me invested enough in our characters. And RRR has some of the best character work of the year. I mean, our two main characters, you can't help but root for them. I mean, you have Raju and Beam, who are arguably the best movie characters of this year, and it's just a bromance that you can't help but love. And also the way that this movie builds up from the first act to the second act to the third act, it just gets better and better and better. I mean, the first act is absolutely huge. That opening scene with Raju's character is absolutely amazing. And then as you keep on going throughout this entire movie, you kind of have that bromance and you have that nice like relationship flourishing in the second act. And then in the third act, you have it elevate even more and you have this amazing final action sequence. I mean, also to mention the action, it's absolutely amazing. It's nothing under like perfect. I mean, it's definitely like anime-esque, but I don't mind that because it was executed really well. Yes, some of the CG is bad, but I really don't care because I was having an amazing time with the movie. But at the end of the day, RRR, it's not perfect in its storytelling, but I think for how grand and how big the story really is, they did an amazing job. Next up, in my number 2 spot for me is Everything Everywhere All at Once. This, along with my number 1 spot, are my only 5 out of 5 movies for this year, and this movie is absolutely perfect. I mean, from the acting to the cinematography to the sound design to the score to the premise, everything is just amazing. I mean, you have a phenomenal lead performance by Michelle Yeoh, who I think should be nominated for Best Actress, Ki-Hoo Kwan, who gives a Best Supporting Actor nomination in my opinion, and then Stephanie Su, who gives a Best Supporting Actress nomination worthy performance in my opinion. I mean, this movie is filled from top to bottom with just amazing elements. Also, the Daniels direct the hell out of this movie, and honestly, my favorite thing about this movie is the fact that it manages to feel so grand and so big within the scope of like a multiverse, and I think it encapsulates this all so well. But further than that, it manages to bring you back into the emotional side of it, and manages to bring you back from, yes, there's all this multiverse stuff going on, there's this, there's that, there's the big, weird, raccoony stuff going on, right? But when you get back to it, when you get back to your regular universe, your main universe, at the end of this movie, it makes you absolutely sob your eyes out. I was crying like a baby, and my mom was sitting right next to me. Like, I was losing it at the end of this movie, and it's so well executed. And I think with a movie like this, you could really mess it up. You really can, and it's very easy to, because you can focus on one element too much. And I definitely think it gets a little bit too wild at times, and that's just part of the multiversal stuff, and I completely get that. But the fact that they can bring it from like butt plugs to talking about not fitting in with your family and then crying about that, like, I think like the way you go like complete 180 throughout this movie is so amazing. And not even my number 1 spot did that for me. This is arguably the best movie of the year, and I wouldn't even be mad if you put it above my number 1 spot, but it's just that I feel like I connect to my number 1 more. But on an emotional level, this movie is just, it's like, I wouldn't say it's like heartbreaking because it's amazing, but it's like heartbreaking in the sense that like I really felt so much during this movie. I mean, there was so much happening already. Like, literally the first like 30 minutes of this movie is just hell on earth for your brain to like actually figure out what the hell is actually going on. But like, as this movie transitions, I mean, there's perfect pacing and there's perfect themes, and there's just one scene from this movie that always gets me.
尽管离家让我心碎，我想告诉你，如果有来生，我还是会选择和你一起报税，开心一点。
That scene, as someone who was 18 years old, who has so much more to still experience, that really felt like it's like, I will wait for you, someone, something, whatever it is. I will wait because that's what I feel like I'm destined to do. And I feel like it's like in the same like ballpark as Banshees of the Inisherin for me personally, with how I emotionally connected to this movie, where it's like, it's kind of me connecting over a fear that I have that this movie expressed so well. And so I know I'm kind of rambling on about this movie, but I'm just like, I still always want to talk about this movie, try to gather my thoughts on it because it's so much. I mean, it's an epic multiversal adventure, but it's also an epic emotional investment and journey. But with that being said, moving to my first place, my favorite movie of 2022 is The Batman. I think this one was pretty predictable. I've talked about this movie an insane amount of times. I made like over 75 videos about this movie on my channel, and most of them were before the movie even came out. But this movie is just amazing. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's arguably one of, if not the best comic book movies of all time. It is just so well made. And maybe it's because it's something that I was lacking from the comic book movie genre. Maybe it's because I felt like I'm such a huge fan of like comic book movies, but I'm also a fan of really getting emotionally invested into like characters and stories, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Banshees of the Inisherin. And you have like the complete opposite of the spectrum. Like you have Black Adam, where it's like you just turn your brain off and enjoy the action. And so this movie for me was kind of like I'm so invested in this character. First of all, I was so excited. And I'll talk about like the people, the crew that actually worked on this movie. That's one of the main reasons why I was excited. But just story-wise, I mean, Matt Reeves crafts such a personal Batman story and such a deep and dark tale, and just this lore behind this Gotham that we got, including Catwoman, Riddler, Gordon, all of these other side characters that feel integral to this emotional arc that our Batman is going on. I think that this movie really gives me, personally me, the best of both worlds, the best of what I personally need. I need an emotional connection to characters like I have in Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I also really love action. I really love some big explosions like the car chase scene, but I also love those emotional moments like Batman finding out the truth behind his family and his mom's past and his dad's past, and seeing what the Riddler is really doing to him, and also the messages behind Riddler's motives, and the fact that really Batman and Riddler believe pretty much the same thing. They're just executing it in completely different ways. And so having the two sides of the same coin, and just honestly, the fact that you can tell the passion behind this movie from Matt Reeves in the director's chair tells you enough about this film. On top of Matt Reeves being an absolutely phenomenal writer and director for this movie, and cinematographer Greg Fraser, who is arguably the best working cinematographer right now. He did Dune and The Batman and Rogue One. I mean, his filmography is absolutely insane. And with The Batman, he brings such an amazing tone. He brings this amazing like grittiness, and that you just don't get in superhero movies anymore. And you guys see, I love superhero movies. I love action movies. I love all things explosions, big superhero comic book stuff. But the Batman is like the perfect mix of like what a comic book Batman should be, like our slow burn detective story, but it's also like this amazing spectacle by the end. But at the end of the day, it doesn't leave out your emotional arcs. I mean, the end of the movie is the perfect full circle to the beginning. It's not like it's some obvious one. You really don't know what's gonna happen to Gotham. It's not like it's predictable in any sense. I mean, I've seen this movie 9 times. And every single time, 6 times in theaters, 3 times at home. And every single time I watch this movie, I'm always amazed by not only the storytelling, but our character arcs, whether it is Batman or it's Catwoman or it's Riddler or any other character. I think the way that Matt Reeves has really played out this story is so amazing. And I also forgot to mention Michael Giacchino on the score. He's arguably the best composer right now, or one of the best composers right now. He is amazing. He really gave us like the definitive Batman score, at least in my opinion. He gave us an amazing Catwoman score, an amazing Riddler score. And the fact that these scores play into the story so well is something I didn't even notice on my first few watches. But once I started paying more attention to the score and the way that they really use it to further the story, it is so well done. And I could just go on and on talking about this movie more and more and more. But at the end of the day, it's just perfectly crafted in my opinion. And it's a superhero movie that I'll never, ever, ever forget. But guys, that's it for my top 10 favorite movies of the year. I know that was a lot of ranting, more than I would normally do in a video, but I really just emotionally connected to a lot of movies this year. It's arguably one of the best years of movies in recent history, in my opinion. A lot of people are comparing it to 2019. For me personally, I'm taking 2022 over 2019, just in terms of the films that were the best of the best that I personally enjoyed. I mean, arguably, a lot of the movies made in 2019 were better, but just for me personally, I'm taking a lot of these top tier 2022 movies over the 2019 movies. And let me know what year of film you guys actually prefer in the comments down below, 2019 or 2022, because I do feel like that's going to be a really big debate going into 2023. But 2023 is also going to be an absolutely amazing year for movies. You guys should look out on the channel for my most anticipated movies for 2022, because that video will be coming very, very soon. But I just hope 2023 is just as amazing for movies as 2022 was, because again, I adore a lot of the films that came out this year. But again, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.